Anya, you still okay? Do you want to pause for a second?
Yeah. No,
Good.
it's important to tell
Okay.
this. The film is based predominantly on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who made 5 trips to the house over about a year and a half to do an investigation. And then they came back a 6th time to make sure that my mother was still alive, because the last time they left the house, they didn't know if she was. Mrs. Warren told me that
Wow.
40 years later,
Yeah.
after I had seen her for the last time, she recognized me as an adult instantly, and we had a very long talk. And she told me, Ed had, of course, passed in '06,
Hmm.
and she told me that his last wish was that she tell the family story, our Perron family story, because in his own words, it was the most intense, compelling, disturbing, and significant investigation that they'd had ever conducted
Yeah.
across their entire career, which is why it was the first in, I believe, 7 films now. But all of those films are based on different case files from the Warrens, and only the first one is about my family's story. And it bears no actual resemblance to what happened. The names and, the likenesses, of course, that's my family on film. But what happened, I would say probably 5% of the film is actual authentic incidents that occurred in the house, and the rest is conjured in the minds of screenwriters.
And you said the well, not you said, but the real story is scarier.
Yes, it I think is probably the first time that Hollywood ever toned down a story rather than exaggerating it,
Yeah.
because they felt that they had to. It was too much for them to handle, and consequently they presumed that it would be too much for the public to handle. And that's not true. It's not true. I mean, I wouldn't sell hundreds of thousands of books if, people weren't ready for the truth, if
Yeah.
people weren't ready to experience on paper, and the chronicling of these events that occurred over a 10-year period. The movie made it look like we moved in, got haunted, sought out the Warrens, they stepped in, moved in, and everything in the end was fine and dandy, and nothing nothing could be further from the truth. That's not how it happened. We lived there for 10 years. There were 7 years of incidents in that house that the Warrens never knew anything about. And those are all chronicled in my books as well.
So you guys lived there for 10 years.
Yeah.
When did the first incidents take place?
5 minutes after we moved in,
Jeez. Okay.
it was the very
What happened?
first thing that happened. Uh, and I didn't even know that it was supernatural in origin. I was only 12 years old.
Yeah.
My sister Nancy was 10, Christine was 9, Cindy was 7, April was 5. I mean, we were just little itty bitty kids, really.
Mm.
I was, of course, at 12, I was, um, much more grown up than my baby sister was. But
Yeah.
the day that we moved in, the thing that's interesting, though, the precursor to that is that we visited the farm a number of times before we actually owned it and moved in,
Okay.
and became very good friends with Mr. Kenyon, Earl Kenyon, who sold the farm to my parents. And he was adamant that the farm needed to go to us, to our family. He told my parents repeatedly what a great place it would be to raise children. And he had raised his son there.
Okay.
So, with his wife, who had passed away about a decade before we moved in. So he had been there alone for quite some period of time, and his son was concerned that he was living too remotely, and so he built a home for him on his own property in the village.
Okay.
and kind of forced him to put it on the market. Mr. Kenyon didn't want to sell the farm.
Right.
But he did, if he had to, he wanted our family to have it. And we visited the farm a number of times. And when I began writing my books, I asked every member of my family if they remembered ever seeing anything, feeling anything strange, sensing, smelling, whatever, anything strange at the farm prior to when we moved in. And no one had any recollection of that. It was almost as though the spirits were, to use a theater reference, waiting in the wings,
Okay.
like for us to actually own it and be there. And the day that we moved in, I walked into the house. We came with a whole caravan of cars and a big moving truck, and it was in the middle of a whirling, swirling ice storm. Little pellets of ice striking us in the face. I wanted to get in the house as fast as I could. My mother and my baby sister April went in the kitchen door, and I went in the parlor door with the first box marked kitchen, and was heading through the house to take it to my mom so she could set up, what she perceived to be the most important room.
Yeah.
And I saw Mr. Kenyon packing his things. I put the box down on the table. I said good morning to him. We chatted for a moment. And then I picked up the box and I turned, and there was a man standing in the corner I had not seen when I walked in the room. He looked like flesh and blood to me. I did not perceive him to be anything other than a living, breathing human being that was dressed rather oddly. And I asked my mom when I walked right past him and I said, good morning, sir. And he didn't respond.
Yeah.
He just looked right through me. He was watching Mr. Kenyon like I was a ghost he didn't see. And I went into the kitchen and I asked my mother who he was. And she said, to my knowledge, there's nobody here. His son's on the way. He hasn't arrived. So I went out the kitchen door and went back to get another box. Meanwhile, my sister Christine walked in. She saw him, walked past him after greeting Mr. Kenyon, went in the kitchen and asked my mother the same question. My mom, who's at this point very busy unpacking, said, I don't know, I don't know who it is. It's okay. Just go get me another box. And then Cindy came in. She asked my mother who the man was that was dressed funny. And then Nancy came in right behind her and leaned over to her and said, did you see that man with Mr. Kenyon? I did, but he just disappeared. And that was our initiation into the paranormal world. And then about 2 or 3 hours later, the four of us, April was still with my mother. The four of us were standing in the dining room where we had initially encountered this spirit and Mr. Kenyon. And my father was talking to him and offering him to stay and live with us, because it was obvious he didn't want to go.
Yeah.
And the house was plenty big enough for him to have his own private space. So, my dad's having this conversation with him, and all of a sudden this spirit appears in the corner of the room again. And the four, my three younger sisters and I'm just standing there like, do you guys see that? I didn't say anything. Nobody said anything because he just manifested in the room. And none of us had ever had any experience like that in our lives. So something, I think, told us not to bring it to the attention of the adults, especially because the adults didn't see him.
Yeah.
Only we did.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of our supernatural excursion through the netherworld.
I believe Mr. Kenyon said something along the lines of, switch the lights on at night. I think to your
Yes,
to your
he
father,
said
yeah.
to my father that afternoon.
Yeah.
It was just about dusk. It was getting dark, and he and my father had a conversation outside about moving in, and Dad was going to help him we used our moving van to move Mr. Kenyon out because he wasn't even ready when we got there.
Yeah.
And so his things had to be moved to storage, what we couldn't fit in the barn.
Okay.
So it was moving day, both ways. I mean, it was us moving in, him moving out, all simultaneously. It was chaos. It was bedlam. Um, but Mr. Kenyon reached over and he put his hand on my father's forearm and he said, Roger, for the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night. And that my father did not know how to interpret. It never even occurred to him, really, that he could be making a reference to paranormal activity that occurs in the house at night. My father figured, all of his girls are now sleeping in 3 bedrooms on the 2nd floor. There's 2 very narrow, dangerous stairways for them to come down, and the bathroom is on the 1st floor. So he figured Mr. Kenyon was, forewarning him that the house could be dangerous for the children.
Yeah.
And my father didn't realize until months and months later when people in the area that lived out, I mean, we couldn't even see our nearest neighbor's house. There was nothing but woods.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
but we found out, from other people that lived in the area that there was never, ever a time that they drove past that farmhouse, no matter how late at night or in the wee hours of the morning, that every light in the house was on all the time. And that's when we discovered that it seemed to be the way that Mr. Kenyon held the activity at bay, or at least could see if something was happening, could see it.
Did he make any reference before you guys moved in that, it's haunted, or disclose any of that?
No. And I'm sure he did not want to be perceived as some, addle-brained elderly man. Of course he didn't. He was absolutely sharp as a tack. He was in his 70s, but he was right there. And no, he did visit pretty frequently because his wife was buried just past the farm on the hill in the Chase Cemetery, and he would go up and visit her there. And so he would stop by and check on us, and did so with, relative frequency. And my mother, once things started happening in the house, one time I remember specifically her asking him about strange noises that she was hearing in the parlor. And he just patted her on the hand and said, swallows in the chimney, my dear, swallows in the chimney.
Okay.
And so that was the way that he reconciled whatever he had heard in the house, and, to put her mind at ease. But no, he never had a conversation with either my father, who he was very close to, or my mother, who he adored. He never had a conversation with them about the house being potentially a haunted location.
You guys stayed there for 10 years. I guess what a lot of people have, you've probably been asked this before, but why not leave earlier?
Well, my favorite version of that question is, what the hell is wrong with you people?
Well, to put
I mean, really, you stayed in an environment like this? And there are 100 different answers to that question. The one important answer to that question, in hindsight, in retrospect, is that we were supposed to. And then 30 plus years later, I was supposed to start writing this tale of darkness and light and share it with the world when the world was ready to receive it.
Okay.
I feel that in some respect, I believe in free will. I have a degree in philosophy, and I studied a lot of, religion and free will versus determinism and, all of that. But I really do believe that in some way it was our destiny to be at the farm, to stay at the farm, and then to share the story of the farm. That I think of it as a paranormal public service.
Okay.
That it's a way of telling what is considered one of the most extreme hauntings that have ever occurred in the whole world, let alone the United States. I mean, this house was haunted before it was the United States. This house had activity going back. I mean, the land for it was deeded in 1680. The house as it stands now was completed in 1736, which is 40 years before the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
This was a true original colonial home, which is why my mother lost her mind over it when she found it, because she wanted her children to grow up at a place in the country. She wanted us to live in the country the way that she had as a child. And there were a lot of things that catapulted us there, a lot of pieces of a very strange, convoluted cosmic puzzle that all had to fall in place out of thin air exactly as they landed for us to even get the farm, let alone, be able to live there for a decade. But at the same time that this was occurring, we had like right after we moved there, this country went into a virtual socioeconomic crisis. Not only did we have the Vietnam War exploding, the oil cartel was formed in the Middle East. The price of oil and gas went through the roof. My father had a business, not as a truck driver. He had his own business, and he sold his wares out of the trunk of his car. He had clients all the way from Quebec to Florida to Ohio. So he was in the jewelry business, and Providence, Rhode Island, being the jewelry capital of the country at that time, was where he restocked. Whenever he would make a trip, he would come home and go see his buddies and go, fill his trunk back up and go back out on the road, a week later or whatever. So he was away from home as much as he was at home for the first couple of years, which is why he had a great deal of trouble assimilating what he was being told when he came home, and didn't even necessarily believe my mother when she was telling him what was happening. And we knew if he didn't believe her, he wasn't going to believe us.
Sure, yeah.
So it became a taboo subject, and it was a taboo subject. It was not something that one discussed amongst their peers. We found out the hard way by just being honest with people that we were becoming friendly with, and we would tell them, incidents that happened in the house, and then they would go tell their other friends, and then people were asking questions, and then parents started calling the school. And at one point, in I think my sophomore year of high school, I was threatened by the school principal and told that if I said one more word about my so-called haunted house, that he would make sure that I was expelled and that I would never find my way to college.
Oh, wow.
And you want to know what terrifying is?
Yeah.
That is terrifying for a goody two shoes, straight A student to hear those words. And he was very unkind in the extreme to me. And I just stopped discussing anything about it, and would tell people, that it was not something that I could talk about.
Yeah.
And so, but, everybody by that time, everybody in town knew that we were having issues at the farm. The house had a reputation that no one ever shared with us until we, had lived there and started having experiences of our own. But, people think that 2008 was tough and that the pandemic was tough on our economy, but you have no idea. You're too young to even remember, or you're maybe not even alive yet, when we had to get gasoline for the car based on the last number on the license plate, odd or even. Gasoline was available on, Tuesdays for odd numbers and Wednesdays for even numbers. And people were running out of gas, and while they were waiting in these long lines and having to push their cars into place. And, the price of gas quintupled overnight. I mean, it was huge. The housing market was exploding. Our home, our new home that my parents had put everything they had into buying this magnificent 200-acre estate. We couldn't just walk away from it. It would have bankrupted our family. And
Okay.
if my parents had immediately put it back out on the market after moving into it, the next logical question for any prospective buyer would be, why are you selling this house as soon as you moved in?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's logic would dictate that that would be the line of inquiry. Um,
Okay.
and my father didn't believe that it was actually happening. And so, since he was the man of the house, and you know, it was a different time, and he was basically calling the shots, he didn't want to hear it when my mother suggested that we sell the farm. And we didn't want to leave the farm. You know, let me clarify that as well. You know, and all of us had had experiences while we, in the months that we had lived there before this all came to a head,
Mm.
between my parents, and we didn't want to leave. I mean, we as children adjusted to this new environment with, I don't want to say relative ease because that would be disingenuous, but we we were more open. I think children are more open
Mm.
to spirit, and we just figured, okay, some people that must have lived here once decided not to leave. And so it was a really big house, and it wasn't like things were happening constantly. And uh, you know, we loved it. We loved the land, we loved the river, we loved the barn, we loved the apple tree, we loved the everything about the place except how cold it was. None of us liked how cold it was, but we didn't want to leave the farm. And so our family, being a democracy at that time, when the you know, when the subject came up, we all uh voted we wanted to stay. You know, my mother was the one kind of left out in the cold in terms of her opinion about the place. And in the end, we were no longer a democracy. In the end, 10 years later, my mother told my father that she didn't think she would survive one more winter in the house and that we had to sell it. And they put it on the market, never told me a thing. I was off in college. Nobody mentioned it to me on any phone calls or anything. And then one day in my senior year, just before I graduated, I got a phone call from my parents that the farm had been sold, and I went into meltdown, hyperventilation mode. I couldn't believe it. I was so angry, so upset, so hurt that no one had even discussed this with me and how I might feel about it, because in spite of the activity in that house, I really loved the place. It was the
Mm.
only place that felt like home to me. I didn't want to go anywhere else. And I thought that I would live there for my whole life. I really did. I really did. And I was shocked, shocked. And then when my mother explained that it was, you know, taking a tremendous toll on her, I had been away for, you know, the bulk of 4 years
Yeah.
in college. And, you know, yes, of course, I saw her when I would come home for the summer and for the holidays and things, but I didn't realize the toll that it had taken on her
Because
physically,
she was
mentally, and
targeted.
emotionally.
Yeah, she was mostly targeted, right?
Mostly, not just her though. Cindy, my sister Cindy,
Yes.
number four of the
Yeah.
five, um, also had numerous experiences, some of which were very negative. And you know, the more we talked about it, as I mean, I call my trilogy of books House of Darkness, House of Light for a
Yes.
reason. My mother is the one that titled the books. She said it was both. That,
Okay.
you know, we learned everything about life and death and the afterlife that we would ever need to know on this plane of action. She has no fear of death. She knows there is something beyond our mortal existence, though none of us could explain to you exactly what it is or who it is. And it almost doesn't matter who it was, that they still are, to me, is what matters. that there is still activity in that house, that what we saw in that house was confirmation of the notion of an afterlife.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of faith or a belief system for any of us, it's knowledge. And that was why I wrote the books. And when every single member of my family contributed enormously to those volumes, I didn't put a single story in the books that wasn't cleared by the participants in the story. And I refer to it as a collective memoir, because it really is all seven of us. And very sadly, my baby sister April passed away in March of 2017. But I will always be grateful that I grew up the way that I did, so that I would know what to recognize when she's around us.
Yeah.
And that I, am in contact with spirit in a way that I never would have been if I hadn't grown up in that environment. I might be living feeling like she is completely lost and gone to me, and that's just not true. She's around me all the time.
Yeah.
And particularly my mother, particularly because my mother is in failing health. And so April spends a lot of time checking in on her. But it does my heart good to know that she lived long enough to be able to contribute mightily to the real story, and to be able to add her own viewpoint, the sum and substance of her experiences. But Cindy had several events, episodes which happened at the farm,
Yeah.
that were what I perceived to be life-threatening.
Okay.
And my mother had a near-death experience earlier in her life before we lived at the farm. And my sister Cindy passed away and then was brought back during a surgery she was having at the age of 2 months.
Oh, wow.
So, as we reflect back on it, I can't help but think that because both of those members of our family had either crossed and come back, or come so close to crossing that they were recognizable by spirit.
Okay.
And so my mother, there was a spirit in the house, and the Warrens said it was Bathsheba Sherman. No, it wasn't. Bathsheba was not even born yet
I've
when
heard this.
the
Yeah.
bending spirit. My father swears it's Mrs. John Arnold. We don't know that. He doesn't know that. He swears that it's her because he feels that it's her. But the only spirit that ever self-identified in that farmhouse in all the years we lived there was the little boy who was my sister April's playmate.
As depicted in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
In the movie, his name was Rory.
Rory.
In real life, he identified himself to her as Oliver Richardson.
Okay.
And even though when we bought the house and the farm, we were told that it was the old Arnold estate, when my mother went back in the records, she found out that it wasn't the Arnolds that built the farm. It was the Richardson family that built the farm. So, long after this little spirit had identified himself as Oliver Richardson, who had died when he was 5 years old, was the same age as April in real life. And he felt comfortable interacting with her, and she could see him with ease. And we would often hear her up in the chimney closet with the doors closed, because it was a warm space in the house. And she would be blah, 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 talking. And we just always assumed she was playing school with her Barbie dolls, or, she was playing with the Fisher-Price toys and having them talk to each other. She was always a very gregarious and imaginative child. And so we just assumed she was just playing.
Yeah.
But she was playing with someone. And we didn't find that out for a while. And she would never tell the Warrens about him, because she was afraid that they would make him go away, and she loved him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So which members of the family were kind of pro staying in the house, and which members didn't want to stay in the house? You mentioned you wanted to stay in the house. Your dad was for staying in the house.
Yeah. And Nancy.
And Nancy. Okay.
Yeah. And Mom, Christine, Cindy, and April wanted to move on.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they wanted to leave. Did you know, as depicted in the movie, well, I guess what I'm asking is, you know, did this really happen? Did the part where I think it was Christine in the movie, she got pulled out of the bed?
Yeah, that's real. That's absolutely real. That absolutely happened to all of us, you know, at one time or another, and some of us over and over again. Absolutely.
On a regular basis, or like this whole thing is depicted over 10 years, while the movie it seems like it's depicted, you know,
Over
over
2 weeks.
a week.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So was this like regular, or was it kind of spread out over the time you were there?
I would say, I was talking to my agent about this yesterday, and I said, in the 10 years that we lived at the house, no, I was talking with the new owner. Jacqueline Nunez is the new owner of the farmhouse, and I was talking to her about it. And she said, I don't want to play up the scary stuff so much. I mean, this is a house of light as well.
Yes.
Like true human enlightenment dwells here. And I completely agree with her, and helping her make that shift.
Yeah.
With the house, instead of just being a house of horrors, because it's not. And, I had to take a moment during our conversation to think about it. But she said, how often did things happen, that really were scary? And I thought about it for a moment, and the incidents that I could recall right off the top of my head, things that happened to my mother, my sisters, and even myself. And I said, cumulatively, over 10 years of living there 24/7, I would say maybe a grand total of less than 24 hours of manifestations.
Okay. All right.
Like a day and night cycle.
Yeah.
Of things. Things happened, they happened quickly. There would be a manifestation, and then it would just dissolve into thin air. We'd see a full body apparition, and then it was gone. I mean, when you add up all those, that happened for 10 seconds, that happened for 30 seconds, that happened for about a minute. Excuse me. COVID, because everyone should have COVID.
Yeah.
And maybe that's already happened. I mean, who knows? I'm much better, thank you. So it was not, in some ways it was a day-to-day thing. I mean, there were like thousands of things that happened that I could have put in the books that I didn't.
Okay.
Because there were different types of manifestations. And so the way I wrote the books was kind of like a swirling timelessness of events from the moment that we moved in till the moment that we left. Okay. Prior to that, volume 1 is chronological, and post move to Georgia, all of that is chronological, and reflective in the third volume, which I think is the best volume, because I thought it would be the easiest to write, and it was the most difficult to write. And it was because it was about our extrication from the farm and how emotionally trying that was for all of us, whether we wanted to leave or not. It was still this enormous transition that happened for our family from Rhode Island to Georgia. Nancy never left. She never came with us. My father couldn't sell the farm in a conventional way. We never got apparently a single phone call on the property, and it was priced to sell. And not a single call came in. It was almost like a cosmic conspiracy to, the spirits didn't want us to go. Yeah. And so they weren't in any way helpful about bringing in another family. And my father ended up going to the abutting landowners that lived in Massachusetts, because we were right on the border. In fact, we had 60 acres of our land in Massachusetts because of a border skirmish that happened like 200 years earlier. And made him a deal he couldn't say no to. And so their family bought the farm, and my sister Nancy was their babysitter. And so when she found out that they were buying the house, she said, you know, if you want me to stay on as the caretaker while you have any work done to the place, I'll do that. I'm not going, I don't want to leave. I want to stay.
Did
And
she
she
initially
did.
stay there alone?
Yes, for
Really?
months. Yep. And then her boyfriend moved in,
All right.
and Eddie Richardson was a direct descendant of the family that built that farm. So
Really?
every time Eddie walked in the house, you know, we all knew it by then. By the time Eddie came into Nancy's life, and I think she was a junior or even maybe a senior in high school, um, as soon as Eddie walked in the house, it got active immediately. Immediately, stuff, you know, was flying around and sounded like a dead body hit the floor overhead. I mean, it was just like immediate paranormal activity whenever Eddie stepped foot in the house. And so eventually he moved in with her after she had been there for a period of time alone. And his whole personality changed. And he went from being a very sweet, gentle, demure young man to someone who was drinking, using drugs, became physically and verbally abusive to her, and she ended the relationship.
Okay.
And when she did that, he killed himself.
Wow.
And
On the property or away
no, very close by, about a mile away. Uh,
from?
and that fractured our whole family. I will never, ever forget the day that Nancy called down to Georgia, and we were all living at the new farm in Salakoa Valley. I'll never forget that day. The shock, the absolute horror of losing Eddie
Yeah.
was just too much for my whole family. Just wept uncontrollably because we all knew him very well and we all loved him. And Nancy had not yet shared with us what had happened between them because she knew how upsetting it would be. And then he died, and she had no choice but to tell us what had happened. And quite a bit is written about him in volume 3.
Okay.
Interestingly, um, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Nancy's grandchild, Lucy, was killed in the Waverly floods in Western Tennessee last
Oh,
August.
I wasn't. I'm sorry to hear about that.
Thank you. She was the most bright, beautiful, vivacious, most extraordinary child I have ever met, ever. Not just because she was my great niece. You know, I
Yeah.
have a plethora. I have 15 great nieces and nephews. My family breeds like rabbits. Um, and but Lucy was special. Lucy was special. And she and her mother were up in Waverly, Tennessee when the floods hit. And they were able to save her mom, but they couldn't save her. They found her 2 days later. And when when the when the flood was hitting and Nancy had found out that Lucy was missing, she started screaming. She was alone in her house, and she started screaming for April, our sister, and Eddie to go rescue Lucy, to pluck her out of that water, to save her, to go get Lucy. And she was screaming it. Meanwhile, one of her other grandchildren was with her other grandmother, and she's a deeply sensitive child, and she was only, I think, 7 years old at the time. And she came out of her room and she said, Grandma Becky, Auntie April just came to visit me, and
Wow.
she has Lucy with her. Why does she have Lucy? And there was a very tall man with red hair. I've never seen him. I don't know who he is, but he was with them. And that was Eddie.
Wow. Jeez. Oh no, you still okay? You still, do you want to pause for a second?
Yeah, no,
Good.
it's important to tell
Okay.
this. It's in the age of COVID,
Yeah.
particularly when we are losing so many of
Yeah.
our loved ones and can't even say a proper goodbye.
Yeah.
I think that it's important to share that aspect of the paranormal that brings us hope that there is something, that there's someone to get us on the other side, to take us by the hand, that there's someone there that we can be received by and in a loving way. And so that nobody really does die alone.
It's comforting. Yeah.
It is.
Definitely.
I find the thought of an afterlife incredibly
Yes.
comforting, and I don't know why anyone wouldn't.
I suppose that's where the light part of the title of your book comes in. Um,
Yeah,
it is that comfort from, when we die, there is something else. There is,
we do go on in some way, shape, or form. We
yes.
do, and some stay behind. Most go on.
Yeah.
Some stay behind, and the most comforting thing about Lucy is that she didn't suffer. I mean, this all happened simultaneously, and her home was hit with a wall of water, an avalanche of water. She was ripped right from her mother's arms. Her mother drowned. They were just able to save her, but they couldn't find Lucy to save her. They found her 2 miles away from the house downriver 2 days later. And, but she didn't suffer
Yeah.
because she was a strong swimmer and she loved life and she would have fought for her life. But at the same time that Nancy had just found out that this had all happened, Lucy was already with her aunt, and it was over. She wasn't suffering someplace. And that is the most comforting aspect of
Yeah.
all. And we wouldn't know that had her other granddaughter not had the gift to be able to have that encounter. And April knew exactly who to go to.
Yeah.
She knew exactly in the family who to go to present Lucy to her loving cousin. They were very close. And the one who nobody would question, no, everybody would automatically believe. And as soon as she said what she said to Becky, Becky called Nancy and told her that Lucy was already gone. And this is why, and this is what she said.
Wow.
It's very powerful,
Yeah.
and it is very emotional, and
Yeah.
it's a story that's filled with grief and a horrible natural disaster, but it's also filled with love and hope.
Yes. Definitely. Wow. How you
Sorry, I
doing?
didn't mean to cry on your
No,
air.
no worries at all.
I do that.
It's
It's not terrible. It wasn't a terrible, ugly cry. I can ugly cry, honey, and really I can, but
it's all good.
I
It's
have
all
come
good.
to terms with her loss.
Yeah. How are you feeling with the whole COVID? You mentioned, when I spoke to you the first time, you said you came down with COVID. How are you feeling now? You still good?
Ugh.
Oh, really?
Well, better.
Yeah.
I had it before anybody knew what it was. I got it from a couple that had just come in from the UK,
Yeah.
flown in from London the night before, and they were both sick as dogs in September of 2019. COVID has actually been tracked back in this country all the way to August of 2019. The
Okay.
first two deaths that occurred on American soil happened in California. Two people that had come into the country from LAX, through LAX, and didn't know each other, came in at different terminals, had no contact with one another. And so those are the first, patient one and patient two, but
Yeah.
they didn't know how to identify the virus yet.
Yeah.
And then, of course, this couple comes in and comes to a Paracon that I was attending and wanted to talk and talk and talk and talk. And they were obviously so sick, thankfully I had tissues at the table to, but they couldn't get their money back, and they'd come a long way to attend this event. And so there it was. And I picked it up before, oh my God, I think before I even left the event, I was
Really?
feeling symptoms of something. But, we in this community have a running joke. If you're going to go to a paracon, you're most likely going to pick up con crud, which is, generally a cold or, some kind of sinus infection or
Yeah.
something. You're going to get exposed to so many different people, you're going to pick up something. So we just generically call it con crud. But this was different. This was different. And I was sick very fast. And then I stayed sick for a long time, for about 2 weeks, and I could barely move. And my father fetched me, took me to the clinic that's attached to the local hospital. It's the people that run the hospital emergency center are a married couple, and they also own this clinic, which
Okay.
is much closer to home. And they said, you're in terrible trouble. You've got no oxygen in your blood. I was hours away from my vital organs shutting down, and I didn't know it. And they treated me with bizarre liquefied oxygen and, liquid antibiotics, and filled my body with about a gallon of fluid of, uh, I mean, they washed my blood essentially and just loaded me up with oxygen. And the next morning, I got on a plane and flew back to Michigan and stayed for 4.5 weeks and did 10 events, just popping a regular dose of antibiotics. And I got through it, but they could not identify what it was that had made me so sick. It never went down into my lungs, it stayed in my bronchial tubes.
Okay.
And then the second time I got it, which was on a flight, I think on a flight back from Rhode Island about maybe 5 weeks ago, it pretty much knocked me out for a couple of weeks. And then I picked it up again, the special UK variant I brought home from Scotland as a souvenir. And apparently so did about a third of the tour group. And I'm surprised it's not more. In fact, I suspect it is more. I mean, we were all on the same bus, breathing the same air, singing at the top of our lungs
Yeah.
for plenty of miles on that trip. Probably drove the bus driver insane. But we were pretty well in tune, all things considered. And it was a wonderful experience. And I came home tired with a very sore throat and itchy ears, and losing my sense of smell and taste again, which I had just gotten back. And so I knew that I had picked up the UK variant before I even took a test. I knew it. I just knew it. And then my phone starts pinging, from one person after another. I just tested positive. I just tested positive. I'm like, oh, damn. Oh, God.
Oh, goodness.
But this time it was nothing compared to the first time, and
Yeah.
next to nothing compared to the last time. So I got the antibodies kicking here. I'm cooking with gas when it comes to COVID and variants too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't, I just don't think that we can isolate ourselves forever. That at some point we have to do what we can to protect ourselves, know that there are treatments available if we get in serious trouble, and go forth into the world. Because otherwise we'll all live in hovels for the rest of our lives, trying to avoid each other. And all that does, and I think it's been well proven
Yeah.
over the last 2.5 years, is all that does is make humanity even crazier.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, you talk about paranormal activity. Yeah, that is it's been a bit of a shit show.
Yeah.
To put it lightly. But yeah, I mean, in any case, the one thing I just want to get back to, because I mean, when me and you spoke over the phone the first time, I think we spoke about, I think 10% was probably about, the experiences in the house, and I think the other 90% was about politics and stuff like that, which I can go on to, I can carry on with that for hours and hours. I still maintain that the paranormal is probably, I think it's a little bit more fascinating than, politics and some of the stuff that's going on in the world now, which just makes absolutely no
No
sense.
sense at all. And I mean, other than voting, we really are powerless to affect any positive change. Well, protesting too, which I've done my very fair
Yeah.
share of. But no, and because there are so many varying opinions out there, and there are so many people that are grossly uninformed or misinformed. It's
Yeah.
just the perfect recipe for a fight, and I just don't want that in
Mm.
my life. I decide who I will engage with and who I will not, and who is toxic to me and who is not, and I get to make those decisions. But I think that the playing field levels when it comes to the paranormal. Even though you are well saturated in this field and a seasoned person who knows that even the paranormal has its own kind of inner workings of political discourse. But I avoid that like the Black Plague of
Yeah.
Europe. I do. What I do is I talk about the fact that there are so many people in this field who whose stock and trade is fear. Scary movies, scary books, scary this, scary that. I don't know why human beings like to feel scared. Maybe it makes them feel more alive.
I think it's the sensation.
That
Well,
shot of
yeah, I think that's a good way
adrenaline.
of. I think it's a good way of looking at it. It's the sensational aspect of it, but I think there's something about it which kind of does make you feel more. It gets the adrenaline going, type of thing. Well, I'm speaking for me. You
Yeah,
say I wouldn't really say I'm well saturated in the field at all. I'm more of a. I'm curious.
yeah.
I
But
don't knock
curious
anything.
enough to have, really, um, you've had some really great guests on your
Yes,
show. You've
fortunate to have.
been
Yeah.
privy to a lot of authentic
Yes.
information, and you're very selective about who you bring on your show
Yeah.
so that you're not, feeding the beast of
Yes.
misinformation.
Yeah.
So you're very responsible. I do my homework before I do an interview. And, um, and I learned the hard way that I had to. And I admire and respect what you do with your podcast.
Thank
And
you.
I'm proud to be a part of it. Frankly, I really am. I thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. I was gonna do now that you say that about being picky and so on. I was gonna do a Netflix documentary recently came out titled "The Most Hated Man on the Internet." I don't know if you've seen that at all.
No,
Yeah, it's I'm not going to go into that at all. I was going to do a piece on it, kind of like a solo piece on it, but I mean the person who is the protagonist in the story, well, it's true life, but I just thought I'm not going to give any attention to it because
no.
if it's just it's such a there's a lot of inspiring aspects to that story, from a mom that helped her daughter and an ex-Marine. It's a great documentary, but for me doing a piece on it, it's going to give I felt unwarranted attention to the actual person that perpetrated the crime, so to
Yeah.
speak, and I just didn't feel like
Yeah, no,
doing it.
I agree with you, and I suggest that you just do your own thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that's how you make a mark in the community and contribute to the community doing exactly what you do. So just, yeah, I would avoid that.
yes,
It's not helpful. If it doesn't add to the greater good,
no.
then just don't bother.
The story which the Netflix documentary covered, and they did a good job in doing that, was focusing on the mother and the ex-Marine who helped the victims of this idiot seek justice and find justice at the end. And I mean they did a great job. They don't need
Mhm,
my my help in
mhm.
because I've seen a lot of people have done a piece on the show, but they focus on the bad of it because more
Yeah.
people are going to watch it, I suppose.
And for some reason, that's why people, there's a lot of people that gravitate to this community because they want to have the bejesus scared out of them, or they're just so fascinated and curious about the notion that the paranormal even exists. When I started writing my books, I didn't even know there was a paranormal
Yeah.
community worldwide. I had been away from it for so many decades that I literally did not know that there were millions and millions of people worldwide that were curious and fascinated and felt the subject matter quite compelling. I literally didn't know if I would have an audience of readers for my books,
Yeah.
and I wrote them anyway.
I think from my perspective, it's kind of, with politics and basically humans just, stuffing things up left, right, and center. This is kind of the ultimate good versus evil
Yes,
in sort of its purest form,
in its
so to speak.
purest form.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the
So that's what
perpetual
fascinates
conflict.
me. Yeah. That's
Mhm.
what fascinates me and kind of piques my interest. It always has. I've just kind of put it on this platform now, and I've been lucky enough to speak to a lot of interesting and inspiring people. But yeah, it is very interesting. I just want to get back to the one piece though. I read that your mom she spoke to a person called, I think it was I'm probably going to butcher the name now, Mr. McKeachern.
Yes, it's actually Mr. McKeachern. I could not find anyone in his family at the time, to have permission to. But when I reprint
Yeah.
my books, I will use his real name, because he's long passed. He
Okay.
doesn't seem to have any relatives that would care one way or the other, that we could find. So
Yeah.
I will, when I reprint the books with my new publisher, I'm going to change it from McKeachern to McKeachern,
Okay.
which was, just a slight little, and he's the one that told my mom and then my father about Bathsheba Sherman.
That's what I'm
Uh,
getting at. Yeah.
and he didn't accuse her of being, the one that haunted the house, because my mother never told him
Yeah.
that we were having issues in the house. But he did tell her of the story. She died in 1885, and he was 10 years old
Mm.
when she died. So she was his neighbor. He lived one farm down, I believe, or two farms away
Okay.
from her and her husband at the Sherman farm in Harrisville. And that, there were only a few homesteads back there. Of course, everybody knew each other. Of course, they were at each other's properties. Of course, all of that.
Yeah.
But he's the one that told my mother that as a young woman, Bathsheba had been accused of harming and or killing an infant in her care while at the farmhouse. And that there was an inquest. The town wasn't even incorporated yet. It was a smattering of villages. And so there was an inquest held in Chepachet, Rhode Island. My mother only found one newspaper article about it ever, and she found that up in the archives at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts. But it did verify what he had told her, which was that there was an inquest and that basically, she denied all culpability, that whatever had happened to the baby in her care surely must have been an accident. And, she was literally let off the hook. It never went to a trial or, anything further. And yes, there were no forensics, analyses available. And, Lizzie Borden certainly talked her way out of what she was accused of.
Yeah.
So that wasn't unheard of either. But I just don't think that you should accuse somebody of murder unless you've got some evidence that they did it.
Yeah.
And so I have been Bathsheba's, I
Protector,
can't
almost in a sense.
absolve her,
Yeah.
but I can certainly defend her,
Defender. Yeah.
and I do so. And I have a strong attachment to her. that I cannot explain, and I don't regret it. I don't deny it. I have actual audio of her yelling her own name out at her own gravesite while I was lecturing, a disembodied voice that came in right over my own voice. I was not recording it. Another investigator that was present. Cody Despiens recorded it.
Okay.
And then when he got home, he called me. He's like, "Oh, Andrea, oh, you're not even going to believe this. Oh my God." And he plays it for me. And I'm like, "Send that to me." And I played it over and over and over again. And it was so strange because, it seemed like I had some kind of recognition of her voice
Yeah.
that was way buried, like way deep.
Okay.
Um, I would say the vast majority of the activity at that house occurs with spirits who actually lived there. And she did not, and she was not a member of the Richardson family. She was not a member of the Arnold family. She was a product of a union between the Taft and Thayer families, which were
Okay.
both very well-to-do families that lived in Providence and helped build Brown University. I mean, they came over, I mean, they were some of the first of the colonists and followed Roger Williams down to found the colony of Rhode Island. So Rhode Island and Providence Plantations actually was the
Yeah.
name. And then started deeding out the land and claiming this little speck in the corner of the country as we know it now. Um, but she got a really bad rap in life and in afterlife and in the court of public opinion in her time. She was accused of killing that child,
Yeah.
and it hung over her head like the sword of Damocles her whole life. And when Mrs. Warren first stepped, without my mother knowing who they were, when they came to our kitchen door the night before Halloween in 1973, it was freezing cold out. It was back in a day and age where it was perfectly okay to invite a middle-aged couple into your home as strangers without any worry about that. The times have changed, but
Yeah.
that's how it was back then. And of course, she invited them in and, offered them coffee, something to warm up. And Mrs. Warren was, a great intuitive. I mean, she had great psychic ability. But I think that she took a leap too far. She said that she sensed in the house that there was a malignant presence in the house, that her name was Bathsheba. Well, that was a very unusual name, even back 200 years ago.
Yeah.
That was a relatively unusual name. And she just kind of plucked that out of nowhere. And my mother, who had already heard from Mr. McEachern about the connections between Bathsheba and the farmhouse, she was like, "Oh, well, where did that come from?" Also, interestingly, before we moved, 2 years before my mother even found the farmhouse, my father brought a puppy home, and my mother swept her up into her arms and said, "This is a very special dog. She deserves a special name." And she closed her eyes and tilted her head back. And when she came back, out of wherever, she said, "We'll call her Bathsheba."
Okay.
Well, we immediately, none of us knew the biblical reference. None of us knew none of us had ever heard that word before, that name. And so we just abbreviated it to Sheba. The dog was Sheba.
Okay.
The whole time we had her, but her real name was Bathsheba. And so how that factors into the equation, nobody's ever going to know, but it was more than a coincidence. I feel that in my soul, that it was more than a coincidence. And Mrs. Warren said, Bathsheba, but then she took this leap of blaming everything on Bathsheba when, the house was riddled with spirits and there was a lot of different activity. And the spirit that was haunting and taunting my mother clearly, distinctly had a broken neck.
Yes.
And Bathsheba did not hang herself. She did not die of a broken neck. She died of paralysis that was brought on by a stroke she suffered in, I believe, August of 1885. And she was born in 1812. the spirit that was, um, clearly uh, hateful toward my mother,
Yeah.
was long dead before Bathsheba was even born, and spoke in a Scottish brogue and had a deep voice and threatened my mother to
Okay.
get out of the house.
And the
And
theory is that's the Arnold woman, because she hung herself apparently.
Mrs. John Arnold,
Yes.
yes, that's what Mr. McEachern had told my parents,
Okay.
that Mrs. John Arnold was found hanging in the barn at the age of 97 or 93
Okay.
in 1797. Those were the digits that he gave my parents. Now, my mother documented everything that she learned, whether it be studying from the town hall records room, or archives, or old books that she found in the local library, whatever she could get to
Yeah.
piece together. She didn't think that the spirit activity was just spirits moving through,
Hmm.
that they had an attachment to the farm for some reason. We didn't find out till 50 years after we left that place that Bathsheba Sherman's husband died on that property.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we didn't know that. A historian dug that up.
And he was Jadson. That was Jadson.
Judson.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And only one of her four children survived her. She had three children that all died before the age of 4 years old.
Yeah.
They're
Oh,
all
wow.
buried beside her. And by the way, had Bathsheba, actually been a practicing witch and there was any evidence of it, she would not be buried in hallowed ground in the center of Harrisville.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't.
Okay.
Pardon me. Edit that out. Sorry. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh my God, this has got to be over soon.
Yeah.
I've got
Hopefully.
traveling to do to go get another disease.
Why do you think um, Lorraine Warren kind of stuck to the narrative of Bathsheba being the evil entity?
I don't think she necessarily did. I never read her art
Case files. Ooh.
yeah, her case files. I never got to see them. She did borrow my mother's file and never returned it. And I do know that that was used as part of the case files for the, I know that through a producer of The Conjuring, that my mother's notebook was in her possession and was used as part of the story, in fact.
Yeah.
But it was never returned to my mother, which is not right. My mom asked for her notebook back many times. Mrs. Warren borrowed it under the guise of making Xerox copies, back when Xerox machines existed,
Yeah.
of everything that was in it, and then that she promised to return it to her, and she never did. Mrs. Warren, 40 years later, when I met her at the private screening of The Conjuring in West Hollywood, California in 2013, in March of 2013, she said that she was sorry and that she felt that it was a supremely haunted item and that no good could come of it in the hands of our family. And that's why we never saw it again. And she was in her late 80s at that point, maybe 90, no, late 80s. And, basically it was gone. Her case files were purchased.
Mm.
And so it was gone. And, I can't bring myself to hate her for that.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't think that the Warrens ever for a moment tried to hurt us in any way. They tried to help us. They were just in over their heads, and she told me so. She told me that from the moment they stepped over the threshold of that farm, they had no idea what they were walking into, which is why Ed, on his deathbed, told her to make sure while she was still among the living to get that story told, because it was too important for it to remain, under wraps for all of eternity. And that was in '06. And I started, unbeknownst to me, I had no idea any of that had happened.
Yeah.
And in August 7th of '07, which was the first day of vacation for me from my job that summer, I went, I had to. It's like a bell went off in my head. Something told me it's time to tell your tale. And I went to town and bought a recipe box and index cards, and decided to start writing down every memory that I had of the farmhouse and, denote it where I could keep it all in a box and start to piece together this very multi-dimensional, intricate puzzle of a story, which is why it's written in a very timeless way. I want my reader to know that from the moment that we step on that property till the moment that we leave that property 10 years later, that the stories are intermingled according to the type of manifestation, the type of activity. The whole story about the Warrens, even though they came relatively early in the years that we lived there, isn't even told until chapter 7 of volume 2. And then everything that happened around the Warrens is in that chapter. The chapter is called Warren Peace. And they wanted to bring peace to our family. I really do believe that. I don't think that they wanted to exploit us. I think that that happened naturally, because not supernaturally, it happened naturally because they were doing seminars and they were talking about interesting cases that they were investigating and talking about their research. And somehow in their exuberance, they told too much and the story got out. And so even though she had an agreement, Mrs. Warren had an agreement with my mother that was a verbal agreement, nothing in writing, that was basically akin to a non-disclosure agreement. She ended up telling enough people. I mean, she thought she was safe talking about our story in Rhode Island, in California. And one of the people who was at one of her seminars with her husband in California drove across the country to come find our house and our family. So needless to say, neither of my parents were happy about that. We just wanted to live as normally as we could in a paranormal world, and didn't want intruders. We didn't want trespassers. We didn't want any of that. And yet that's what happened, because the story got out, and it was a fascinating story, and it was very compelling to a lot of people. And so they sought us out, and it became a problem.
When did Hollywood come knocking, wanting to do a movie? Well, basically, when did you first sort of hear of this, that a major motion picture was going to be made? I know James Wan wanted it to be, I think, rated 30 or PG-13.
Yes, he did. He was very, I was with him.
Yeah, but that
the rating came down as an R, and oh my God, James is a very small man. He's he looks like he's 15 years old. He does. He's just a small man. And he just blew up and puffed up like a peacock. I swear to God, I have never seen it. He was so upset. And he told his assistant to go back and call them back and ask them what he would need to take out of the film to get that PG-13 rating. It had, no real violence compared to, what we normally see just on network television every night. It, had no sexual content. It had no gratuitous language in it. It was, as sterile as anything that you could see, other than the subject matter. Yes. And the MPAA said there's nothing that you can take out. It's just too scary. This isn't kid stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's purely theater of the mind. The camera leads you there, then something's happening there. It's probably in terms of movie watching, it's probably the best scary movie I've ever seen. I actually watched it again. We used to make our friends watch it back in South Africa. If they've never been to our house and they stayed over for the first time, we used to make them watch it purely for our enjoyment, because we wouldn't be watching the movie, we'd be watching their reaction.
Yeah, watching them watch the movie.
Yeah. And it's so well, it's credit to James Wan.
He's a master craftsman. Yes. He is.
It's insane, because there's no blood and gore, and it's purely theater of the mind. And
I didn't want James to be the director. I was very upset when I found out that he had been brought on as the director. And I had never seen any of his films. I only knew them by reputation.
Yeah.
And the executive producer called me and said, Andrea, you'll be happy to know we got our director. It's James Wan. And I was like, are you kidding me? You just hired the king of slasher porn to make our intimate family story. Are you kidding me? And he's like, no, you don't understand. He's a total, paranormal aficionado. He knows everything about the Warrens. He's absolutely the perfect choice for this, and I was like, oh my God. All I could think of was everything that I had heard about how absolutely gruesome the movie Saw was.
Yeah.
And, I would never lay my eyes on it. I don't watch horror films. Literally the only horror film I have ever seen in my life is The Conjuring, because I had to.
Yeah.
It's not my thing. I watch, Broadway musicals. I watch BBC. I'm into, everything BritBox, and I watch the news, like the real news.
Yeah.
Not the fake news, the
not
real
the fake news. Yeah.
That's it. And listen to a lot of music to calm my last raw nerve, living in a world full of this kind of trial and tribulation. I was unprepared for that news. And it wasn't until I met James in person that I had to take it back. I just had to walk it back. My whole attitude changed because he is a deeply intellectual human being. I mean, really thoughtful in his approach to everything that he does, and very crafty in terms of the way that he makes film. But the thing that impressed me the most about James was the way that he handled the children on the set. My biggest concern in making The Conjuring, once they finally settled on that title, was that the children not be traumatized making the film, not traumatized in, the way that we were. And he had a built-in support system for every single one of them. Parents and some siblings were there. And they had I don't like a counselor available. He spoke with the girls. He treated those 5 girls like he had birthed them himself, like they were his children. And he bumped one in the shoulder as she passed by and go, it's only a movie, I mean, after she had just filmed a difficult a difficult piece. I was on the set. My family was on the set. Hold on, there we go. Sorry, my computer just suddenly popped something up on my screen. It's prone to do that. It speaks.
No worries.
And it was my father and my 4 sisters and myself. My mother reneged and refused to come on the trip at the very last minute. And while we were all away at the soundstage, well, we never went to the soundstage. We only went to the remote location that's behind you, that house. That tree that you see there, that's not even a real tree. That is not a real tree.
I read that. Yeah.
Made in the art department at Warner Brothers.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I know. It's bizarre, but my mom fell and broke her hip while we were away, and said she had been pushed. And she had no recollection of it. But when she came out of anesthesia, we raced back the next morning to Atlanta and went to the hospital to see her. And when she came up out of her anesthesia, she said, I haven't felt that presence in more than 40 years.
Wow.
And then she laid back down and slept all the way into the next day and has no recollection of saying that. But she said that in front of all 5 of her kids and her doctor and 2 nurses. Jeez. So she felt like something had been stirred up and that she took the brunt of it. And, I confronted it and I said, Bathsheba was very upset about the film. She felt that, first of all, she was a radiant and ravishing beauty. And for her to be physically portrayed like that.
Yeah.
And the thing that upset her the most, and I got this through a couple of spirit box sessions that I did with a good friend of mine who I consider master of spirit box. She was so insulted that a man played her in the film, that Joseph played her in the film.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. He was also the composer of the original music for the film. So he had kind of a dual role.
Okay.
And he also played the nun, I believe. Joseph also played the nun. Jesus. They were keeping all the work all in the family,
Yeah.
And it ultimately, I think that I wouldn't be one of the very best-selling authors in this genre had it not been for The Conjuring. I think that my books, The Real True Story, would have been lost to the annals of history. It wouldn't be known. I'll always be grateful. But your original question was, how soon did Hollywood come knocking? And the answer to that is actually quite interesting, because I started writing in August of 2007. In September of 2007, I got a phone call from the then owner at the farm telling me, and I had already told her that I started writing the story, and she encouraged me to do that. She thought it was a great idea. Very supportive of it. And then about a month later, I get a phone call from her saying that a Hollywood producer, had reached out to her about wanting to make a movie of the story and wanted to know how to get in touch with me, or I guess maybe any member of the Perron family. I don't know. I mean, she said me, but he could have asked for any of us. And she promptly told him that I only lived a few miles away and that I was already writing the story, and would he want my phone number, or could she give me his phone number? And so she called me and I said, yeah, you can give him my phone number. But, I didn't really take it seriously. Because, I mean, I don't even know how it coincided that I started telling the story in print at the same time that a major motion picture studio decided that they were going to make a film about the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren. I can't tell you how many authors have come to me and said, how did you get your books made into a movie? And the answer is, first of all, the movie is, has nothing to do with my books. And second of all, I didn't go looking. They came to me.
Yeah. Wow. Jeez. In the movie as well, just some of the stuff, were there funny smells as depicted?
Sometimes gross,
okay,
horrible smells of death.
Yeah. And the clocks that stopped at 3:07,
5:15,
5:15
clock that would stop at 5:15
a.m.
Not all of them, just the one. My father's clock that he had inherited from his father. It's a small wall mounted, like a grandfather's clock, except a smaller version up against the wall. And it had always worked perfectly fine. My father had had it forever after his father had died. So for years and years, because my Pepe died quite young. I believe he was only 52 when he died.
Okay.
And my father inherited that clock, and we always had that clock in the family. And it worked perfectly fine until we moved to the farm, and it worked fine at the farm until it didn't. And whenever there was a major manifestation in the house, it always seemed to happen at 5:15 a.m. and it stopped the clock.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did
We
which
still
part
have
of the
it.
house?
It's
Sorry,
hanging in my dining room
really?
right now. It works perfectly fine. Yeah.
Okay. Which part of the house had kind of the most activity? Because I mean, I saw the real basement
Mhm.
on a document. The real basement is scarier than the one in the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. And before they even put concrete down, when we lived there, it was a hard dirt floor. So it
Okay.
had a very pungent, earthy aroma
Yeah.
to it. And it always stays the exact same temperature. So if it was like summer and hot in the house and you opened one of the cellar doors, there would be just this rush of cold air that would come up from the cellar. Um, and, it took us a while. I'm sorry, my nose is so itchy. I feel
Oh,
like I'm ready to sneeze all the time. Like I'm ready to sneeze.
that's fine.
Um, so anyway, yeah, it was an area of the house that we had numerous experiences in and that we all avoided.
Yeah.
We didn't like to have to go down there. And yeah, we used the root cellar to keep fruit fresh and
Mm.
keep the potatoes in and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, every now and then we had to go downstairs and get another bag of something that needed to come up from the root cellar. And it was never a fun trip down those stairs. They were rickety and they've been replaced. In fact, the cellar stairs that go down from the main foyer of the house now go down in the opposite direction of what they used to go down.
Okay.
I don't know why they shifted that around and changed it, but subsequent to our ownership, that happened.
And
Um,
did your mom really start getting bruises?
oh God, yes. My
Really?
mother had numerous encounters where she was bruised and injured and had what appeared to have been a needle stuck in the calf of her leg and was pushed, was shoved, had a hand sigh fly down and come across the leather jacket that she was wearing, my father's bomber jacket, and destroyed that. And that saved her because that was a very sharp blade and it cut right across her neck in the barn.
Wow.
She was impaled with a tomato stake in the garden. My mother was physically abused by a spirit in that house, physically abused. She was told she was not the mistress of the house, that the
Yeah.
spirit was the mistress of the house, and that she wanted my mother dead or gone. She wanted my mother out of there, and she was very covetous of us, the five children, and had a real thing for my father. She wanted mom out of that house, and it took my dad a while to admit when he started having experiences. It took him a while to admit that, yeah, maybe there was something to this, what he was being told, what he was hearing.
Yeah, I
But by
suppose for
that time, it was kind of too late.
yeah.
My mother was so bitter and resentful about the fact that he didn't believe her in the first place, that it created a rift between them that just widened into a chasm over time. And even though they stayed together for the 10 years that we lived there, within a couple of years after we moved to Georgia, my mother filed for divorce. It
Mm,
was a very sad time in our lives.
yeah. I suppose from your dad's perspective, I mean, like you said, times were tough, during
Really
those
tough.
days. And he was working and really his focus was on
keeping a roof over our heads and food on the table.
Exactly. And I think this was kind of the last thing that he needed now was, we have to move because there's, because of ghosts or whatever. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah, it is. And I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it took him a long time to disclose this to me, but when I was writing the books, actually I was in the third volume. I was finishing up the third volume, and I had a real heart to heart with my father, and I said, what do you think was at the core of your disbelief about what was happening there? And he said, fear. I was so afraid. I had moved my family into a house, into an environment that I had absolutely no control over. And it took him decades to come to, not necessarily for him personally, to come to that determination upon reflection, but for him to tell me that he was afraid was a hard thing for my father to do.
Yeah.
But I get it. I do understand. I really do.
Mm.
Fear is a very, very powerful human emotion. And the only thing that conquers it is love. And, it was love that got us through that decade-long ordeal. It was love that got us through as a family unit. And the love of both of our parents wanting to protect us.
And I mean, not a lot of people, well, as you said, fear is so powerful. And the thing is, not a lot of people want to admit to having fear.
Right.
Except me. If I was in that house, I would admit it, 7 days a week, 24/7, but that's me. Just the one thing that I want to get to, and someone asked me to please ask you this. Did you guys really play the clapping game as depicted? Okay, good.
No, we did. My sisters, I was kind of like mom's helper. I was at an age where I could do a lot more things and be more helpful to my mother than, say my baby sister. And so I was with mom a lot. And meanwhile, the girls were exploring the house and getting into trouble here and there. And there were several incidents that occurred during our first winter at the farm, so the whole clapping hide and seek game was actually based loosely on the real story. And it got to the point where it got so dangerous to play hide and seek in the house that my mother insisted that not happen anymore. And that if we wanted to play, we had to go outside in sub-freezing weather and go slide down the hill or make snowmen or, whatever outside. That, it wasn't. Nancy got trapped in the boarding room and Cindy had to come rescue her. And that was one of the incidents where she said the smell was so overwhelming that she was retching. I mean, it was just awful and freezing cold, and something was putting a great deal of pressure on her little body and shoving her into the corner behind the chimney in the boarding room. She was terrified out of her mind. And there were several incidents that were oh,
no worries.
Damn it, this is never going to be over. There were several incidents that occurred that were very frightening while the girls were playing hide and seek in the house, and my mother said, no, go outside. No crawling up in the eaves, no crawling up in the closets, no, going out to the woodshed, stay out of the barn. I mean, it wasn't just the house. The barn was just as active as the house. The woodshed was just as active as the barn. Now,
it's such a rich history. The seance. I heard of a seance that went terribly wrong.
Yes.
And that involved the Warrens.
Yes, it did.
What happened?
It was the single most terrifying incident of my life.
Yeah.
I do not in any way dabble in the dark arts. My fingers will never touch a Ouija board.
Yeah.
Um, I don't call in that kind of dark energy. But the medium that Mr. and Mrs. Warren brought with them to conduct a seance at the house, that for all intents and purposes, they foisted on my mother and father. My father wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. The more negative energy he exuded about it, and the more nasty the conversation got, the more my mother shut down emotionally. And, Mrs. Warren was very assertive in the way that she dealt with it. They showed up with a whole contingent of like an entourage of
Yeah.
people that night. My father had just gotten home from a trip. The last thing in the world that he wanted was them coming. It was a very young paranormal investigator, Keith Johnson, who had happened onto this story. He said my mother called him for help. We don't, she she said, I never called anybody, Annie. I never called anybody, which tells me that there was already spiritual finagling going on.
Yeah.
That's, spirits can manipulate technology, spirits can throw voices, spirits have, particularly powerful ones can really screw with us. They really can. I never thought that before, but after growing up in that environment, I absolutely know it now. So I don't know who called Keith Johnson, but he said it was my mother. My mother
Okay.
said it was not. So the jury's out on that forever and ever. But he's the one that told the Warrens about our predicament. And they came to the house. Uh, and it was the fifth time that they had been to the house that they said that it was absolutely necessary. Mrs. Warren said it was imperative that seance be held. Well, my dad didn't want any part of it. He felt that it was dangerous, that they had a priest with them, they had a medium with them to conduct it. They had cinematographers, they had an audio specialist. It was like a caravan when they pulled in the yard. My mother did not expect that. They had called earlier in the day. Lorraine had and said she wanted to come by the house with Ed that night. She didn't tell her at all about why or what their intention was, or that she was bringing, a small army of spiritual warriors with her.
Yeah.
And so when they all showed up, my father's head blew off. It was just not very nice. And, my mom started to scramble to get us out of the house. It was a Friday night. Um, Nancy was able to go stay with her friend Katie, but the rest of us had no place to go. We were four of the five children were in the house.
Okay.
I have gone on record many times saying that what happened that night was nothing short of spiritual malpractice. The medium spoke in, I believe, Latin. I had studied some Latin. It sounded familiar. Um, and conjured the spirits and opened wide the doors to the netherworld and invited everything and everyone in so that she could determine who the culprit was in the house. And that almost cost my mother her life. And this all happened within a matter of a few moments, maybe a few minutes. Um, we had been told to go upstairs and, stay out of the way, the children. And, naturally we disobeyed orders immediately and came downstairs to see what the hell was going on in the dining room. And my sister Cindy and I were peeking through a semi-open door. My sister April was sitting around the corner on the stairwell to my bedroom. And April was, I guess, probably around age 8 at that time. I was 15. And Christine was up in the middle bedroom, right directly above the parlor. And she was just laying in bed. She could hear everything that was going on downstairs. And the table began to lift off the floor. It was about a 200-pound rock maple table seating for 8. And it started to lift off the floor. And then hit the floor so hard it left impressions in the wood. And then my mother, in the chair that she was sitting in, which was a captain's chair, had to weigh about 30 pounds. She started being levitated and started crying. Her body drew up into like a ball in the chair. Her head dropped, and then it flew back, and she was speaking in a language that does not exist on this earth. It was pure, unadulterated evil that had infiltrated her body. It had all the power that it needed to kill her. It didn't want to kill her, or it would have done so.
Yeah.
It wanted to make its presence known to the Warrens and everybody else. The medium collapsed on the table. All the candles had been, like a gust of wind had come through and blown out all the candles that she had lit at the center of the table. The priest was standing over in the corner, literally quaking in fear. The cinematographers and photographers were trying to get shots of what they could. The audio specialist ran into the other room. And my mother lifted up in the chair that she was in, and then in a split second, that fast, she was thrown from the middle of our dining room into the middle of our parlor. And there's just no other way to say it. When her head struck the floor, everybody that was present in that house thought they had just seen my mother die.
Wow.
Including her children.
Jeez.
And so I don't think that calling it spiritual malpractice is, too far of a leap.
No. No.
I think that it could have been handled much more responsibly, and probably shouldn't have happened at all, because what came through was not of this world. It was pure evil, and it even scared the spirits in the house. They were absolutely quiet, dormant, subdued for months after. And I think Mrs. Warren probably figured, okay, so we cleansed the house. But that was not true. What came through and attacked my mother was not possessed. My mother was attacked. And what came through terrified the spirits in the house. And a couple of months later, we had the most enlightening experience that ever happened in the house. And I guess when they felt comfortable to manifest and come back, they did so in a remarkable way. Okay. And my mom had a severe concussion. Yeah. My father took very good care of her. He was trained medic. He knew what to do. He threw the Warrens and everybody out of the house. It was a very, very ugly scene.
He punched Ed Warren, didn't he?
Punched Ed Warren in the mouth. Yeah, in the nose, I guess, really. He had a bloody nose. Punched him in the face, bloodied his nose, and took him to the floor. Yeah. And Ed was a big, big man, way bigger than my father, but my father was so angry. Yeah. My dad had no memory of that until Cindy and I reminded him that that's what he did, because we saw him do it. I cleaned up the blood with peroxide and a terry cloth rag, out of the wood floor, hours after. But, my mother could have been killed. She could have been. It was a very, very dangerous thing that happened. And I'm grateful that she has no memory of it. To this day, absolutely no memory of it, but I guarantee you everyone alive that was present on the scene that night
won't forget it.
Vivid memory of what they saw transpire. As my father was throwing the Warrens out, well, Mrs. Warren made a really bad error in judgment when she accused my father. She didn't accuse my father. She said earlier in the evening, to prompt the seance, if you really love your wife, you'll let us do this. And, to say that he found that objectionable was the understatement of the past millennium. and had to be removed from the room. I mean, had she been a man, he would have punched her for saying such a thing. But Mr. Warren tried to stop him from going to mom when he was injured, and that was just a bridge too far. And my father reacted spontaneously. All he wanted to do was make Ed let go of him so that he could go to my mother's side. And so that's how he did it. And as they were leaving, Mrs. Warren sent the cinematographers down into the cellar to collect their equipment because they had film rolling. They had the big cameras, like, they're like huge, state of the art for the time. And they were in 1,000 pieces all over the cellar. There was nothing salvageable of their equipment. They both came up the stairs crying. I was still standing in the front foyer when they did, and they ran out of the house. They ran out of the house, and we never saw them again. And everybody left very quickly. And then about 6 weeks later, the Warrens came back to see if my mother was alive. And the first question that my mother asked was, "Did you bring my notebook?" And Mrs. Warren said no. And my mother just closed the door and said, we're all done here. We're all done here. She knew at that point, I think, that she was never going to see it again. But it was still very upsetting to her because she had done hundreds and hundreds of hours of historical research and gathering birth and death certificates from the different people and the different generations of families that had lived in the house. And, it was just an extraordinary amount of work that she had done that was lost.
Well, it was her property.
Yeah, it was her property.
Yeah.
And some other things disappeared from the house that night that were later seen under glass in the Warrens Museum.
Wow.
And so, it's a mixed bag, and people make mistakes. And I really can't believe in my heart that Ed and Lorraine ever really wanted to exploit us. They just wanted to get to, the truth of the story, what was really happening, who was responsible, why there was so much activity in this particular house. And with that notebook went sketches and drawings of all the apparitions that my mother had seen or that we had seen, her writing down and, chronicling every event, dating it as it occurred, and so on and so forth. But the epiphany, the moment where my mother, who went dramatically downhill, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, in every conceivable way, my mother was suffering after the night of the seance. And she was sleeping a lot. She was living on coffee and cigarettes. She wouldn't eat. And I had to step up. I was 15 years old. I had to step up. And, this incident had happened, the seance happened in August of 1974. And it was October of 1974. It was already cold out. I think if I hadn't turned 16 yet, I was pretty close.
Yeah.
And I kind of took over as the surrogate mother to my 4 younger siblings because somebody needed to step up and help her. And one night she came out of her room. She'd been sleeping for most of the afternoon and well into the evening. And I was sitting on the sofa doing my homework. I had made beef stew for dinner. We used to have this fantastic pressure cooker. I don't know whatever happened to it, but I had made a beef stew for the girls and a fresh salad, and we all had dinner. I helped them with their homework, got them all off to bed, and then it was my turn to do my homework. And I was sitting on the sofa in the parlor, and Mom came out of her room and she asked me what I had made for dinner. And I told her, and she, said, "Could you warm me up a bowl of that and make a short pot of coffee?" And it was quite late. It was probably 10, between 10 and 11 at night. And I had a fire going because it was cold. It was always cold.
Yeah.
And I walked through the house. The house had been, pretty much shut down for the night. And I walked through the darkened dining room, through the front foyer, into the kitchen, into the pantry. And I was gone for about, I would say 10 or 15 minutes. Microwaves didn't exist yet. So I had to dip the stew and warm it in a pot on the stove. And Mr. Coffee didn't exist yet. So I had to percolate a short pot of coffee from my mother. And in my absence, she was standing on the hearthstone. She turned around and threw a big log, the last log of the night, on the fire. And as she was replacing the screen on the hearthstone, she heard laughter over her shoulder. And she turned and she looked, and suddenly the dining room that had been completely shut down and closed up for the night, dark as it could be, was filled with light, candles and oil lamps, and the fireplace that had been sealed shut for more than 100 years when we bought the place was wide open. And there was a woman standing cooking stew over the fire. I'll never know if it was the beef stew that prompted all of this cosmic stuff to happen or not. But those dimensions coincided for those moments. And there were children, a couple of kids, and the mother was laughing and telling them to, take their place. Dinner was ready to put it on the table. She had a big cast iron thing to lift it up off the flame and put it on the table. And there were two men sitting on the other side. It was a hand-hewn oak table, not our table, two benches on both sides. And there were two men sitting on the right-hand side of the table. And one of them turned and looked into the parlor and made direct eye contact with my mother. And he smiled at her. And then he nudged the man that was sitting next to him and pointed her out. And in that moment of recognition, she realized she was their ghost. She was the ghost to them. They were looking at the future, and she was looking simultaneously into the past. And they were using pewter dinnerware and pewter steins, which was already outlawed in the 1800s for that kind of use because of the lead content. And so it had to have been, what she was seeing was from the 1700s. And she just, her mouth just fell open. She's like, am I, even seeing this? I mean, I'm looking at them. They're looking at me. There is, conscious contact here. There is communication here. And that was when she said to me, that was when I realized that we were living in a portal cleverly disguised as a farmhouse, so that's where I got that phrase years ago. But it was multiple dimensions existing simultaneously. It was proof of the existence of the fourth dimension.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
It kind of blew her mind open. She suddenly wasn't fearful anymore. She felt like she had just been gifted with information because she was able to make that conscious contact, and that she was recognized as someone that was standing on the hearthstone. And, I can imagine one of them thinking, she's dressed in some very odd clothing, bell bottoms from the 1970s, and stuff like that, I mean, we looked at them and thought, oh my God, these people dress so funny out here. And then, they look at us the same way, like, what are those kids wearing? I mean, when we realized that we were living in shared space and that it was their house first, and that it was imperative that we be respectful so that we can try to keep the peace with them. Those were all epiphanies, but among the greatest was this incident where my mother realized it all made sense to her finally, and she stopped receding from us. She came back to life.
Mm.
He came back to life.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Amityville case? I know the Warrens were involved in that as well.
No, not much. I mean, I do
Really?
know one of the kids, Christopher,
Okay.
but you know, like I said, I never watch horror movies. I don't read scary books. I'm not really interested. When you grow up the way I did, you don't need to step into a theater to be scared.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
need to crack a book to go, oh my God. You know, it was not my job to take any of that in. And in a way, I'm really glad that I didn't, because it was never given the opportunity to taint my psyche. You
Yes.
know, my memories stayed pure and fresh and clear. And when you have an incident or an occurrence that is so bizarre and so surreal that it sears itself into your memory bank, it's like branded on your brain permanently. Um, you know, that's enough to think about. It really is. I'd rather watch, you know, a show about fly fishing. Honestly, I would, than to pollute my brain with, you know, a lot of hoo ha
Yeah.
out there. You know, it's a lot of it is, it's
Sensationalism.
it is. You know, I think our story is the only one that was ever toned down instead of riddled with hyperbole and exaggeration. You
Jeez.
know,
Well, listen, thank goodness the movie was, toned down, because it was bad enough as as it was. But
I didn't really see it that way, you know, but because I didn't, I mean, there was only one scene that really got to me,
yeah,
really got to me. And that's when Lily Taylor was at the top of the stairs with the shaking match and, you know, screaming my name because I had heard my mother scream my name like that in that
yeah,
house. And so I felt my whole body. I mean, it was just like PTSD. It was like, boom, you know, it just brought me right back to one of those moments. And that was literally the only thing that I saw. I was not happy about the scene where my mother is holding my baby sister with a pair of scissors poised
yeah,
over her heart.
yeah,
That was a bunch of bullshit. That
yeah,
never happened. My mother would never ever have done anything to harm her children. Her whole motivation in life was to figure out how to protect us,
mm,
not how to harm us.
mm,
And I thought that the story did a disservice to my family in that respect.
yeah,
My mother thought that was so ridiculous that she just sloughed it off like it meant nothing to her.
yeah.
When she finally saw the movie 2 years after it was released on DVD, she finally saw it because she didn't come out to the premiere. She couldn't travel, and neither could my sister April. So April stayed with mom and dad, and my sisters Nancy, Christine, and Cindy came with me for the premiere of the film.
I can imagine why she would be, because, unfortunately in today's society, you get so many gullible people that'll watch a movie and assume, that is 100% what happened. I mean, listen, there's still people that believe Tom Cruise is Maverick from Top Gun,
Yeah,
or do you know what I
I
mean? It's so,
And that
uh,
speaks to the mental, emotional psychoanalysis that needs to be done and society at large. You know,
yes,
Bathsheba Sherman no longer has a gravestone because some lunatic who saw the movie went and took a crowbar to it and broke it into pieces. And now her final resting place has been disturbed, and has not been replaced yet. And I don't even know if they should, because I think the same thing will happen to it. In fact, when I first found out that it had been destroyed, I got really angry and I went to one of my producer friends and I said, will you help me make a video? And he said, yes, of course. And we put it out on YouTube. It's buried under hundreds of other videos on my YouTube channel now. But basically, what I said is, listen to me. I don't know who you are that you did this, but Bathsheba does. And woe be unto you.
yeah,
Woe be unto you for doing what you have done. This was a fictionalized version of events in a Hollywood movie, and you decided to go and destroy and desecrate this woman's final resting place because she didn't get tortured enough in life. You want to make her, punish her in afterlife for something that got said about her in a movie that
Yeah.
not true. Are you kidding me? And I'm pretty sure I dropped the F-bomb in that one. I was pretty upset. I was, I was upset, but I put it out. I had him
Yeah.
loaded up on Facebook and put it out on YouTube because I wanted the word to get around. You stay away from her. Stay away from her.
It's just amazing to me that things like Ouija boards you can pretty much buy.
Yeah, they're cardboard
Yeah,
and
I
with a
mean,
piece
you
of
can buy
plastic
them.
shoved in the
You can
middle of
buy
them.
them anywhere. They sell them at most novelty stores.
But it's not the Ouija board. It's the energy and the intention of the individuals who are using it as a conduit for
Yes.
communication.
Yeah.
You could draw out your own thing on a piece of, with a Sharpie on a piece of white cardboard and move a stone around it and accomplish the exact same thing. It's a Parker Brothers toy.
Yeah.
And even though it has its origins in the spiritualist community in, the mid to late 1800s, and, it does have kind of an esoteric background and evolved, I guess, in terms of spiritual evolution, of understanding of how to communicate with the other side. I'm not saying that exactly the way I want to, but I think you get the gist of it.
Yeah.
It's not the Ouija board itself. It is the intention and the energy and the input of the individuals that are around it that are wanting to connect in the same way that the word seance literally means communing with the spirits. Now, if you're standing on the side of a road and you suddenly have a sense of your grandfather standing there beside you, who's been gone for decades, and you can feel him and you might be able to smell his pipe tobacco, something that would spark that memory. He's with you. You're in the midst of a seance. I don't care if it's, in the middle of Manhattan.
I see what you're saying.
You're communing with the spirits. My Aunt Vivian, who I adored, I get to visit with Aunt Vivian more now that she has passed than I ever did in real life because we lived so far apart. And one day I walked into the kitchen when I was still living in Georgia with my mother and Christine, my sister. I walked into the kitchen and all I could smell was the hot steam of boiling tea bags. My Aunt Vivian made the best sweet tea that ever touched my lips. It was strong enough to curl your hair and sweet enough to, just brighten anybody's day, take a bad mood away. And I walked in the kitchen and I'm like, Mom, are you making tea? And she was in the back of the house and she came into the kitchen. She's like, no. And I went in, I looked over at the stove. There was nothing on the stove. And she walked up to the sink next to me and we just looked at each other and we both said together, Aunt Vivian's here, So we stopped what we were doing and we spoke with Aunt Vivian. And then the smell dissipated, the aroma, I should say, dissipated, and she was gone.
What do you make of I think is it Norma Sutcliffe who lived in the house? She tried to disprove everything. But that could also be because obviously the house got a lot of attention, so there were people constantly going out there. You think that could have been a reason for that, or did she really
do
just
an entire show
really?
just on the trials and tribulations of my relationship with her?
Oh, okay.
It was a real friendship for 28 years. She's the one that sent the Hollywood producer to me and then went on national TV and told everybody that I never even bothered to tell her that a movie was being made. She had bought dozens of my books to give away to friends, have me sign them and give them away to family and friends. And then suddenly she just disavowed me, my mother, my family, called my mother a liar on national TV.
Wow.
At the time, my attitude about her, after she turned on me like a viper and blamed me for every hardship she ever faced in her entire life, my attitude at the time was, let there be a special hell for her to burn in.
Okay.
Really, my family had been absolutely consistent about our story for half a century. She bought that house because of its reputation. She knew about our family before she ever met any of us. And the way I met her was she walked into my restaurant, recognized my business partner, and started talking to her about having just bought an old haunted house up on Round Top Road in Harrisville, Rhode Island. And I knew what house she was talking
Yeah.
about. And I identified myself as one of the Perron family. And she knew the whole background, the whole story of everything that had ever been written already. And then had the temerity and the audacity to do a complete 180 when the film came out that I had nothing to do with. I was a consultant that they ignored. They didn't take any of my advice or
Yeah.
do anything that I suggested that they do with the story. They did it the way they wanted to do it. It was their money, it was their concept, and it was based on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren,
Yeah.
not on the trilogy House of Darkness, House of Light.
Yeah.
So I only had so much pull with that. I tried to get Warner Brothers to agree to security for her. They contacted her. She was so mean to them that they said, you know what, lady, you're on your own. We didn't use your house to film at. So, she blamed me for putting the address out. I never did. I never did. And all the years that my books had already been circulating, nobody ever went up there and bothered her or her husband of my readers.
Mm.
They were all way too respectful to just, impose themselves on, the private owners of this, historically significant, magical, mysterious piece of property. It wasn't until the film came out that all hell broke loose. And then she blamed me for all of it. And I'm a big girl and I can take care of myself.
Yeah.
But when she accused my mother of being a liar and basically said that, I wrote this story and then made my family swear to it, which is ludicrous. It's beyond ridiculous. That was the end of our friendship. And, she's tried to cause me a great deal of harm over the years and probably has. But I can't afford to care about that anymore because this is her issue, not mine.
Yeah.
And after her husband died, I decided that, what had been basically a declaration of war between us needed to come to an end. It was just a war of words, but she insisted that I take down videos where I have her, I'm interviewing her, talking about all the paranormal activity that goes on in the house. She's the one that brought the ghost hunters in and, one paranormal investigative group after another for years and years. And I never knew anything about it. She never, cleared it with me or suggested that I might want to come along and see what they're doing or any of that. That was her thing. And that's what she was doing. If something came on TV about it, I found out like after it had aired. It was just, was just disingenuous on every single level. And, I'm sorry that she faced hardship there, but after her husband died, I just buried the hatchet and not in her head. I just buried the hatchet in the ground and said, that's it. I've said my piece. I've put it out on 100 different interviews, my family's perspective about this, and what really broke my heart and what really upset me was that she went after my mother. My mother doesn't give a damn. My mother's like, I have nothing to prove to anybody. I don't care what she says, or, if she's, blithering on or was upset because they didn't use the house to film at and she lost a boatload of money because they reneged on a contract that she had signed with them. And or that she used the house as a daycare for little kids for years and years without ever disclosing to anyone of the parents that the house had a reputation of being haunted. I think she was afraid of being sued, and I think she was really, really pissed off about losing a whole lot of money, and that she never got factored into the equation
Yeah.
into the Conjuring.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: the only people that made any money with the Conjuring were the people that made the Conjuring. If you knew how little my family was compensated for the use of our names and likenesses, you would be appalled.
I think I mean, obviously there's a lot of people that would say, it was done for a book. I know the Warrens have come under scrutiny because, they wanted publishing deals, they wanted that. Now, I mean, it doesn't really matter in the grander scheme of things. You guys experienced something. So it's not really for you to prove to anyone.
No, I have nothing.
I kind of agree with your mom. Listen, I couldn't
Yeah.
give two shits who believes me or
Yeah.
not. I had
I
this
believe
happen.
her phrase was a rat's ass.
There we go.
Yeah.
So,
I don't care.
no.
And before I could even write the books, I had to get to an age. I was 48
Yeah.
when I started writing the books. We moved away from that house when I was 21. So decades had passed before I felt like like the story was more important than people's reaction to it.
Yeah.
And I just got to the point where I didn't care. It was how I just didn't care anymore how people reacted. If they, called it a hoax, if they called it a this or that or the other thing, because I'm not here for everyone. None of us are. And it was more important to me to tell this story because so many people in this world have experienced profound examples of paranormal activity in their own lives and were afraid to speak about it, afraid to share it, afraid to speak their truth. And what I have found in the telling of our story in House of Darkness, House of Light, is that our story liberates others to tell their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is its great reward for me. That's what matters to me. And I had no idea when I started writing the books that Hollywood was coming knocking, 4 or 5 weeks later. I had no idea that the universe was going to drop that in my lap. It never even occurred to me.
I'm a huge, like I said, I'm basically a movie holic as well. Over weekends, I love watching movies. Now, I'm also kind of a fan of, I'm pretty wise to how the industry works. It's not as cut and dry as you write an interesting book and Hollywood is going to make it into a story. There are literally thousands and thousands of whether it's true stories or not true stories out there. And I mean, let's face it, a lot of the times they just put based on a true story on pretty much anything these days. So it's not as cut and dry as well, what you've been accused, or what Norma Sutcliffe maybe accused you of, saying, "Oh no, you did this to get a Hollywood movie." It's not that easy. I mean, it's
I'm not going to make her issues my own. There was a time when that was a big black cloud hanging over what otherwise felt like a very illuminating experience. Seeing our family, at least elements of our family story told on screen. And that's her issue. I mean, she even created a disruption. I was doing an event, the Ocean State Paracon, at the theater in Harrisville, and she intruded and imposed herself on a theater full of people and rose up, and we were there raising money for a good cause, and she came there to cause a scene. And my father put her in her place and they removed her from the theater.
Why go through all that trouble though? I mean
don't know.
From her perspective, I mean, if you don't believe that someone did this, why go to a theater full of people? I mean, that kind of makes
She had an ulterior motive,
okay. All
and
right.
that's her own. And I won't make it part of my
Yeah.
consciousness.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm kind of done with that subject
Yeah.
because it's not worth my time. There's
Done.
so much more interesting things to discuss, like the fact that people think that I'm the ghost lady. And my real interest and the bulk of my research that I've done my whole life is in UFOs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's my gig. That's my thing.
Okay. I've had some really interesting guests on the whole UFO subject on this podcast as well. That is fascinating as well. But
Oh, I'll come back and I'll give you a couple of hours that will blow your
really,
mind.
well, we'll set it up definitely. That sounds
Okay.
good. There's so many fascinating things happening. Again, happening on Earth now. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so many mysteries and stuff that kind of, and thank goodness for that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if life was all about politics and the whole Trump, Biden, or whoever, and I mean, it would be pretty, I think, boring and a little bit disturbing as well.
Oh, I don't know. I find it all very interesting right now. All I am about is justice and accountability. That's,
Yeah.
that's my thing. But, it is, we're living, there's an ancient Chinese proverb. Um, it's a curse, actually. And it follows in translation. May you live in interesting times. And if there were ever interesting times, it is now, as we watch our democracy dangling by a tendril. And there are things worth fighting for,
Yeah.
and democracy is one of them. It's not a perfect system, but it damn sure is the best one on earth. And I'm not willing to exchange it for an autocracy. So, I have my fight to fight, and I do, but that does not really overlap into this world.
Yeah.
And the only way that it does is that I think that everything that has transpired in the last 5, 6 years or so, particularly, is a very big part of what I refer to as the paradigm shift. And when people ask what that is, I tell them in the simplest terms that I can. It's that period of time where everything changes, where what was no longer is, and our perceptions of the world have been completely altered. And that's what's happened. And, it started back in 2012, um, at the end of the Mayan calendar, when that was just the Mayan end of the Piscean age
Okay.
and the entering of the age of Aquarius. Um, I've done enough research on this to give it some legitimacy and some credence. But that was really the big shift, is when it started to occur. There were an alignments, what they called the harmonic convergence of the planets all aligning, and the new age was coming, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth, the age of Aquarius, when the moon is in the seventh house. Oh God. But that was the year that the asteroid came in over Siberia.
Okay.
And that asteroid, which no one spotted or knew it was coming, or if they didn't inform anyone in the world about it, knowing that it would be an extinction level event. It was massive, and it was traveling at about 16,000 miles an hour. And I saw film footage from a Russian MiG that captured the film footage that was released not to Reuters or AP or UPI, or, it was released into the paranormal community. And I've seen the film footage of two vessels that attacked it prior to it hitting the ground. One that looked like a singular long tubular white vessel that was traveling at 32,000 miles an hour that hit the back of it and fractured it into a billion pieces. And when it exited the asteroid, it wasn't one vessel, it was three. And then off to the side, there was another vessel that apparently seemed to be shooting it with some kind of a laser to scramble its molecules so that it could actually be broken apart. And two separate races of extraterrestrials saved us.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they did. If that thing had hit this earth in total, now 1,200 people were injured by the impact, but no one died. No one. If that had hit the earth full force in total, no one would be living north of the equator on the entire planet. It would be a dead planet.
And when was this? In 2012?
2012.
Okay. Wow. Jeez, got some research to do.
Yeah.
Andrea, thank you very much. This was honestly this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm fascinated by this stuff, and it's an honor to speak to you. It's pretty amazing. Because I've watched the movie so many times. I've delved into what the true story was and what was real, what was fake, and to be able to hear it firsthand from you is awesome. Thank you very much.
Well, there's one thing. Do you remember the scene in the movie? It's one of the things that I call the cosmic kisses of The Conjuring.
Yeah.
The scene where the camera comes sliding around through the upper hallway and rounds into what was my room, Shanley Caswell playing me.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a drawing that's propped up on the mantel board in the bedroom. It's a folk art drawing of a white cat.
Okay.
I don't know if it was a print or if it was a paint by number that was popular in the 60s or 70s.
Okay.
But I was given that as a gift that I found at a flea market when I was about to turn 13 years old. And my mother's best friend bought it for me. And it still hangs here in my office.
Oh, wow.
In what I call the man cave. And how much do you think I was knocked out of my chair when I saw the exact print that I have had since I was 13 years old at 63, 50 years ago? It was given to me as a gift. And the set designer must have found it. And she never was given any photographs of the inside of the house. There was never a photograph taken of the cat print that I knew of or that I ever found in any of our family photos. How did she choose that white cat to put in my bedroom next to a wooden peace sign that was a virtual duplicate of one that I had hanging in my bedroom? There's no ways. The odds are
astronomical.
Yeah. And Cindy running through the house with a pair of wind chimes to go hang on the porch at the beginning of the film, identical to a pair we had hanging on our front porch. There's no way the producers or the set designers or the props people or anyone could have known. There's no way they could have known. And yet these objects appeared in the film. And so to me, that's the universe saying, it's okay. It's okay. Just let it be. Yeah. It's perfectly fine. Exactly the way it is. This was supposed to happen this way to pique the curiosity of those who actually take this seriously and who will then seek out the real true story. Well, and that's exactly what happened.
The ending in the movie, it's actually such a beautiful ending. And I don't know how many people have said this, but I mean, once you get to the ending, it's a pretty, it's good triumphing over evil.
Over evil.
Yeah. Which is kind of mean, almost what the movie's all about in a sense.
Yes, it is very simplistic in those terms, just like The Stand and, countless other films that, are based on very compelling stories. It really is the duality. It speaks to the duality that we live in a three-dimensional world, in a multi-dimensional universe. And, that constant conflict, one would be indistinguishable from the other if they didn't both exist.
Yeah.
And yet there remains that constant fight, between the darkness and the light, and the good and the evil. And it's deserving of being explored in terms of supernatural activity. I think that it extrapolates the concepts out in a way that I've not seen done before.
Yeah.
And so, I'm proud of it. Even though my part in the film, in the making of the film, was relatively a small one. I mean, I didn't even warrant credits at the end. I looked, believe me, because I had given them hours of my time of stories and stuff. And I'm like, oh, sure, they'll at least list me as a consultant. Nothing. And that's fine. Let it be their movie. It's our story, and nobody can ever take that away from us.
Exactly.
But I think that it serves a very valuable purpose. I think that it teaches, it's kind of like a morality lesson.
Yeah.
And it also, I think, teaches people to release their own demons and speak their own truth and seek deeper. And it's that seeking deeper that has brought countless thousands of people into my life. And, as readers, as friends, as associates, as, people that I stumble upon at the next Paracon, it's like, oh God, I haven't seen you in a year or two or three, COVID, it has enriched my life enormously, in that of my entire family. And there's something extremely liberating, truly freeing about telling your truth. And so I encourage everybody to do that at all times. And I think that it's part of the paradigm shift. It's literally helping us as a story, as a truth, to ascend spiritually and to understand more about 3D and our role that we play in that, but also that we do live in a multidimensional universe, and that it's okay to have faith in an afterlife, because there is something that does exist beyond our mortal existence. I still can't tell you exactly what it is, but I really truly believe that there are only two important questions. And one is there something after this? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And are we alone in the universe? And the answer is an emphatic, oh, hell no, we're not. And so that's my whole life revolves around these two questions.
Yeah. And I think those are I think those are probably two of the biggest questions that are being asked. And they probably have been asked by everyone.
Yes.
At some stage. At
some point in there. If they are a thinking, feeling, prescient human being, then yes, you would assume that they've questioned that in the wee hours of the morning, because what are people afraid of more than death? What are people afraid of more than death? It is what haunts each and every one of us. Our impending death is like a little personal demon that travels on the shoulder of every single one of us, that goes, be afraid, be very afraid, be very afraid. And I am here to tell people there's nothing to fear.
Yeah.
Energy is not created, nor is it dispersed. It transforms. And when we die, we go on in some way, shape, or form. And some of us might leave this plane of action, and others might have reasons, their own reasons, for remaining earthbound for some period of time. But we continue on. And that, to me, is a comfort to my soul.